Too Sly for You writes, "Hey, genius." Wow, sarcasm. That's original.
Hello there, and welcome to the only building in the city that has a fake observatory built into it. Right now, DreamWorks is on fire. Last year they had two movies that stuck out in the minds of audiences, The Bad Guys and Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, with the latter receiving widespread critical and audience acclaim, including being nominated for Best Animated Feature at the Oscars. They also announced they're making a live-action remake of How to Train Your Dragon, but no one's perfect. This comes after years of them seemingly being stuck in a creative rut. Now they're once again in the public spotlight after seemingly getting their groove back. But let us not forget that they already had a decent track record of movies already. Case in point, the once cult classic Megamind, which thankfully has started receiving a lot more recognition in the last few years, is one of those great movies. And not only that, is a superhero parody movie, almost before its time. If it was released today, it would likely find a lot of success right from the jump, even though certain people would probably say it was like woke or whatever because Megamind wears eyeliner and the movie deals with toxic masculinity. Oh yeah, I'm going there today. Now, one reason that Megamind didn't receive the success it deserved when it came out may have been because it was seen as a ripoff of a then recently released little indie flick you may have heard of called Despicable Me, with the only real connection between the two being that they both had a supervillain protagonist, which is an admittedly novel concept, especially for the time, but there isn't a lot of similarities besides that. Honestly, a much better comparison for Megamind is Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog, which was also released around the same time. For those of you who don't know it, which let's be honest is probably most of you because you likely clicked on the video for Megamind, or because it said toxic masculinity and you wanted to leave an angry comment. Dr. Horrible's Sing-Along Blog is a 3-part independent satirical musical web series released in 2008. That was the first take. I definitely didn't trip over my words at all when I said that. It stars Neil Patrick Harris, Nathan Fillion, and Felicia and follows the exploits of Dr. Horrible, an up-and-coming supervillain who's trying to get into the coveted evil League of Evil through various schemes, but is always thwarted by the charismatic Captain Hammer. Meanwhile, Dr. Horrible's alter ego, Billy, attempts to find the courage to talk to and initiate a relationship with the girl at his laundromat, Penny, a problem that is further complicated when she and Captain Hammer start dating. If you haven't seen it, I really recommend watching it. It's free on YouTube, it's like 40 minutes long, and it's such a great watch. It's linked in the description. Pause the video and go watch it, because I'm going to completely spoil it in this video, and I do not want to spoil Dr. Horrible for you. It is so worth it, I promise. Alright, are we back? Good. Let's compare these two for a moment, shall we? Both are about supervillains told sympathetically from their point of view. Both satirize the superhero genre in their own unique way, and interestingly enough, both have things to say about masculinity and toxic masculinity. More specifically, the phenomenon known as nice guys. They both explore how the inherent power fantasy in the superhero genre can play into specific issues with masculinity, shall we say? And I want to talk about that today. I love a thesis statement, am I right?
You dare challenge Megamind!
Alright, I am dressed in the same shirt as I was a couple of seconds ago. I have not changed because I stopped recording after the end of the intro last time because I got retired after just recording for 12 minutes. I'm fine. You're crazy. Gaslighting isn't a real word. Anyway, let's talk about Megamind, shall we? One thing that sticks out to me about this movie when we look at it through the lens of masculinity is how Megamind and Metro Man become the villain and the hero, respectively. From the beginning, Megamind is never really a bad guy. He just wants to find acceptance with people, but he's punished at every turn by those same people for just being who he is. While Metro Man has the world handed to him on a silver platter and is adopted by a rich white family, while Megamind ends up in super prison. And so eventually Megamind just leans into it and becomes a supervillain. It is worth noting though that even then, he never really does anything that bad. And when I say that, I mean actually nothing bad, not in the critical drinker definition. Sure, he kidnaps Roxanne Ritchie and causes a ton of property damage, but he only ever really threatens to kill Metro Man, mostly because he knows on some level that he never actually can. It's why he's genuinely surprised when his plan seemingly works out. But even when he takes over the city and claims to get everything he ever wanted, he still feels that emptiness. What he realizes is that he was really in it for the game, for the chase. Prison doesn't mean anything to him because he can break out at will, and he's well aware that he is always beaten. So the only thing that keeps it going for him is the friendly rivalry with Metro Man. For him, it's like good, clean fun where no one actually gets hurt. Except for him, but he doesn't really seem to mind. So that's why he creates Hal as a hero and is put off when Hal wants to kill him.
Oh, you can take me to jail now.
Oh, no. I was thinking more like the morgue. You're dead!
Whoa. This isn't how you play the game.
He was never really evil, he just made up this game to cope with the fact that society just doesn't like him. Metro Man, on the other hand, is a very egotistical person. He's a showman. On some level, he's only really in the superhero gig for the notoriety, and he literally walks on water. Come on. He's not necessarily evil or anything, but he's not a hero. Not really. He himself expresses that that was never really the role he wanted. It was just kind of something he did because it was expected of him. And so when it first occurred to him that he could just leave, he did. Which wasn't necessarily a supervillain move, but was pretty irresponsible of him.
How could you do this? The people of the city relied on you and you deserted them. You left us in the hands of him. No offense.
No, I'm with you.
He was also somewhat forced into a societal role that he never really wanted, even if he clearly loved the attention it gave him. So he went on to become the annoying guy at parties.
Free to get in touch with my true power. Weaving lyrical magic. Check this out. I have eyes that can see right through lead.
Anyway, my point with all of this is that this is a pretty clear commentary on how people who are traditionally masculine and people who aren't are forced into boxes by society. Megamind is slender, nerdy, has bad social skills, and is blue, while Metro Man is buff, good-looking, and charismatic. Neither are really bad guys for wanting what they want, even though they do fall into the literal hero and villain roles. They both follow the archetypes that society expects of them, even if, in this case, those archetypes are a lot more comic booky than they would be in real life. And most notably, both of them are hurt by this. Toxic masculinity hurts everyone involved, because sure, it makes non-traditionally masculine people feel bad about themselves, but it also puts pressure on those who are traditionally masculine to conform to those standards. However, the movie is not making the case that all non-traditionally masculine people are the real heroes or something. One thing that's often left out of the discussion of toxic masculinity is how it makes those it mythologizes worse for its society, but also anyone who believes in it and subscribes to it as a way of life, or as a belief about the world. Essentially, it doesn't just negatively affect these pillars of masculinity, but also those who don't fall within that box. Enter Hal, perhaps the most toxically masculine character in the entire movie. While it's true that physically Hal isn't this ideal pillar of masculinity or anything, he still subscribes to this worldview that is inherently misogynistic. Masculinity itself is not misogynistic, of course, but toxic masculinity is definitely built on misogyny as a foundation. And Hal is the perfect embodiment of that. He is obsessed with Roxanne, but he doesn't see her as a person. He sees her as an object, a prize. A prize that he, like the rest of the city, assumes that Metro Man has. And so the second he's given the powers of Metro Man and the identity of a superhero, he assumes that he's got everything he needs to win over Roxanne. The problem is, though, Roxanne just doesn't like him that way, primarily because he's a creep.
I'm having a party at my house. It's gonna be off the hook or whatever. You should come over. I got a DJ, rented a bouncy house, made a gallon of dip. It's gonna be sick.
Oh, I don't know, Hal. I don't really feel like being around a bunch of people.
No, that's the best part. It'll just be like you and me.
But even if he wasn't, she doesn't need a justification, since he's not owed her affection for being nice to her. Well, nice.
And I'd be watching you like a dingo watches a human baby.
As Stephen Sondheim once said,
Nice is different than good.
that little girl is not Stephen Sondheim, but you get my point. And this carries over into when he gets powers. Once he's become Titan, this new superhero, he tries to do the whole rooftop date scene between Superman and Lois in the original Superman movie, following all of the beats, but missing the feeling. He goes to Roxanne's apartment, kidnaps her, flies her through the air, endangers her by throwing her around, almost getting her killed by dropping her, and then is shocked when she doesn't want to be with him after all that.
This is so us. We're like an old married couple.
Look, there is no us, okay? There will never be an us.
But I have powers. I have a cape. I'm the good guy.
You are a good guy, Hal, but you don't understand. We need to find out why. Hal,
This
just take
isn't
a deep
right.
breath and listen
You're
to me for a
supposed to
moment.
be with me.
And then after that happens, he completely drops the hero act and takes over the city, showing that he was clearly only in the hero gig to get with Roxanne. Speaking of Roxanne, remember what I said about how Hal and everyone assumed that she and Metro Man were dating? Well, they aren't. That detail is really interesting to me because it's possible that it was a detail included so that it would be ethically okay for her and Megamind to date without giving off "she sure bounced back quick, didn't she" vibes. But I'm willing to give the writers more credit than that. The city assumes that Metro Man and Roxanne are together because they spend time together? Because Metro Man is this powerful Giga Chad who automatically gets the girl? Even Megamind assumes as much, which is why he captures her as bait for Metro Man so often. But imagine what it's like for Roxanne, being pretty much reduced to the girl Metro Man saves in the eyes of the public. I think it's very telling that it's not until Megamind, disguised as Bernard, spends more time with her and actually starts talking to her that we start to learn more about her besides, well, Metro Man. Megamind ends up spending more time with her and learning about her and working to do good deeds just to make her happy. Notably, not in a way that she would know he was the one doing it. He doesn't just see her as a prize to be won, but as a person. He listens to her wants and works on bettering himself and fixing the damage he caused in order to make her happy. And when they end up falling out, he respects her decision and only decides to come back to her when he needs her help for something else. She's given the space to breathe and affect the story and not just be a living MacGuffin or interior fridge decoration. All in all, Megamind is a really interesting look at how, on a societal level, toxic masculinity affects people as individuals, reducing them to just their societal roles. I mean, we don't ever learn Metro Man or Mega Man's real names, or even if they have them. The day is won in the end by allowing those roles that people are in to expand beyond their limiting capacity. Sometimes the dastardly villain has the best heart. Sometimes the reporter love interest is the one who has all the best plans. Sometimes the unassuming cameraman is the most dangerous of them all. And sometimes the brave superhero is Music Man.
Music Man?
That way I could keep my logo.
Ultimately, it was the belief in and adherence to strict social norms and roles that caused much of the conflict in this story. Similar to how toxic masculinity creates restricting roles for men and women to adhere to and just leaves non-binary people completely out of the question. And ultimately, the message of not forcing yourself to be restricted by those social norms is incredibly powerful. Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog is an interesting contrast to Megamind. For one thing, it's much shorter, it's much more mature in the sense that they mention doing the sex, and it's a musical.
It's a brand new day, and the sun is high. All the birds are singing that you're gonna die. How I hesitated, now I wonder why. It's a brand new day.
Why yes, I am a theater kid. How could you tell? But when you boil the two movies down, they're very similar. I mentioned a whole bunch of similarities that they had in my thesis statement, a couple minutes ago. But one thing else I didn't mention is how they both work from the same core character archetypes. Captain Hammer is Metro Man, Penny is Roxanne, and Dr. Horrible is Megamind. But the thing is, he's also Hal. And that makes for some very interesting readings and interpretations of the story, and for what it says about toxic masculinity. Of course though, considering the subject matter of this video, I don't think we can go any further without acknowledging the elephant in the room. Yeah, so Dr. Horrible was partially written by Joss Whedon, which complicates this whole venture quite a lot. Sarah Zed, the filthy Canadian, has a great video that goes more in depth on the whole subject, but essentially Joss Whedon has done a lot of stuff that reflects on the messages and intentions behind his projects, including Dr. Horrible. Stuff that very much relates to toxic masculinity, and specifically misogyny. If you're completely unfamiliar, let's just say that Whedon is that guy you knew in college, who always told all the girls that he ever talked to that he took gender studies, and would say stuff like, I just really understand what you're going through as a woman, I get it. But then the second that a girl rejected him, he would call them a crazy bitch. You know, fun stuff like that. He wasn't the sole writer for the series, and I do think that we can analyze art on its own merits without necessarily relying on the authorial interpretation. But I do think it is something that's worth mentioning and that we should keep in mind going forward. If you still haven't watched Dr. Horrible, let me remind you of what I said just a couple of minutes ago. Hold on, Stars Neil Patrick Harris, Nathan Fillion, and Felicia Day, and follows the exploits of Dr. Horrible, an up-and-coming supervillain who's trying to get into the coveted evil League of Evil through various schemes, but is always thwarted by the charismatic Captain Hammer. Meanwhile, Dr. Horrible's alter ego, Billy, attempts to find the courage to talk to and initiate a relationship with the girl at his laundromat, Penny, a problem that is further complicated when she and Captain Hammer start dating. Okay. Are we all caught up now? Good, because one thing that I find interesting about Dr. Horrible is that he almost seems to be overcompensating for his evilness, or lack thereof. He calls himself Dr. Horrible, for one thing, which is just a name that screams, I'm so evil, I promise. Yet at the same time, his motive for being a supervillain and joining the evil League of Evil is to, help make the world a better place?
The world is a mess, and I just need to rule it.
You're not really interested in the homeless, are you?
No, I am. But they're a symptom. You're treating a symptom, and the disease rages on, consumes the human race. The fish rots from the head, as they say, so my thinking is why not cut off the head?
Of the human race.
It's not a perfect metaphor.
Which kind of seems contradictory, right? The reading that makes the most sense to me is that Billy was a kid who had a poor social life, most likely through bullying and possibly for being small and not traditionally masculine. So he defaults to supervillainy to rebel and take back some control in his life. But he doesn't necessarily want to take over the world and be evil, it's just the only way he knows how to get anything done. He's kind of similar to Megamind in that way. Captain Hammer, on the other hand, is pretty much the embodiment of the stereotype of toxic masculinity. He's a charismatic, egocentric superhero like Metro Man, but he's also misogynistic, really selfish, and incredibly lacking in actual human empathy.
May not feel too classy, begging just to eat. But you know who does that? Lassie. And she always gets a treat.
He is purely motivated by anything that strokes his own ego. And society just absolutely fawns over to him because he's a charismatic superhero who falls into that toxically masculine ideal. It's elevated for sure, but it's not too far off. His breakdown in the third act where he runs away crying after feeling pain for the first time is also indicative of the fact that he's very privileged. In this case, because he's literally never felt pain. And so retroactively you realize he was never risking anything by saving people. And with these two characters, you can draw a pretty explicit connection to toxic masculinity through the song "A Man's Gotta Do What a Man's Gotta Do," where Dr. Horrible justifies his evil plan to get into the evil League of Evil, and Captain Hammer denotes his heroic endeavors as responsibilities to their status as men. In this story, the superhero/supervillain dynamic is essentially a measuring contest. Now this is all well and good, but there's another layer that adds an interesting dynamic. That layer is the third main character, Penny. Penny is, as you can probably gather, a woman. A shocking development in this story, more updates to come. This of course means that another element of toxic masculinity rears its ugly head in this discussion. Penny is not a very complex character, at least not that we see. You see, she's mostly viewed as a goal/object throughout most of this story. Captain Hammer, of course, uses his charisma to charm her and date her, at first just to satisfy his ego and add her as a notch to his belt, but he also later sleeps with her in order to get under the skin of and taunt Dr. Horrible. So he's obviously misogynistic, but the thing is, so is Billy. He builds up this idea of who Penny is in his head, and that image is someone who is just like him. The story is told from his perspective, so there's some unreliable narrating going on, notably with how he views Penny. It's somewhat subtle, but if you pay attention, it's pretty clear that Billy is a stalker. From little things like this picture that he has of her that was clearly taken in a bush, to the whole song where he's literally stalking her on her dates with Captain Hammer, to even this line.
From the laundromat.
Wednesdays and Saturdays, except twice last month you skipped the weekend. Or if that was you. It could have been someone else.
Despite all this, he does manage to find himself in a position to actually talk to Penny. And to his credit, he's much better at it than Hal.
Like a dingo watches a human baby.
But even as they talk and seem to have a genuine connection, it's clear that Billy doesn't really make a whole lot of an effort to actually get to know her. Sure, he knows that she loves frozen yogurt, but he doesn't know who she is as a person, her wants and her values and stuff. At least not past the surface level, which is pretty clear when he fantasizes about how happy she'll be when he takes over the world.
And she may cry, but her tears will dry when I hand her the keys to a shiny new Australia.
In fact, when he hard focuses on his mission to kill Captain Hammer and, in his mind, get the girl, he's abandoning his chance to be with her in person and talk to her and know her, which it's clear that Penny misses. He just thinks that if he succeeds as a supervillain, he'll win Penny's affection. It's the same kind of mindset that Hal has in Megamind, where he thinks having superpowers and being called a hero is enough to get Roxanne to date him. And this is where the real tragedy of Dr. Horrible comes to light. The focus on the conflict between Hammer and Horrible overshadows Penny quite a lot, but with what actual little attention she is given, she's a pretty compelling character. We as an audience learn a lot about Penny, way more than Hammer or Billy ever does. Penny is a person with her own wants and desires, who hints at a vague but rough childhood that left her with self-esteem issues, and a desire to right the wrongs done to her through charity work. Her ideology is pretty optimistic despite whatever she went through, which contrasts with Billy's pessimistic outlook. And she's not stupid. Billy clearly views her as gullible for falling for Hammer's personality, but he saved her. Or at least that's what she thinks. Hammer goes on her with dates, and clearly listens to her on some level because he's able to use his sway with the mayor to get the homeless shelter built that she wanted, which she is overjoyed by. Sure, we all know that it's a ploy to get under Dr. Horrible's skin, but Penny has no reason to even suspect that. And of course, when Hammer is Hammer at the opening of said homeless shelter,
Don't worry if it's hard, if you're not a friggin' you will prevail.
Penny is one of the only people to see right through it. It's pretty clear that there's a real person underneath the images that Dr. Horrible and Captain Hammer project on her. And of course, it makes her death extra tragic. Yeah, you knew this part was coming. Penny is a victim of collateral damage after Dr. Horrible's death ray explodes, which wouldn't have happened if he didn't feel spurred by his need to prove his masculinity through killing Hammer, and thus didn't tamper with his stun ray to turn it into a death ray. This whole final act is basically just a length measuring competition between Hammer and Horrible, and Penny is the one who's caught in the crossfire. And after that happens, what happens to Billy?
And I am fine.
He suppresses his emotions. He buries himself in the Dr. Horrible persona, not quite taking over the world, but becoming a far darker and colder version of himself, joining the evil League of Evil, and committing to his societal role. The extreme fans of Captain Hammer, the toxically masculine caricature that Horrible hates, become his fans. He has essentially taken on Captain Hammer's role in society, only this time with the express purpose of causing harm.
Now the nightmare's real. Now Dr. Horrible is here to make you quake with fear, to make the whole world kneel. And I won't feel a thing.
Yet the broken man is still there, hidden and hurting. Dr. Horrible is all about how these societal roles, for men specifically, talk up a big game about protecting people and changing the world, yet all they do is cause harm. To people like Penny and to people like Billy. Because let's be clear, he may be the protagonist of this story, but Dr. Horrible is not and never really was a good person. At least not during the runtime of this series. But he always had the potential to be. If he was able to realize that he had something good with Penny, maybe not a romantic relationship, but a friendship at the very least, everything could have been different. But instead, he saw her as an object, as a prize to be won. A treasure that it was claimed by another man, Captain Hammer, and Penny lost her life as a result. Now I feel as though I should address the Whedon stuff because that is what complicates my feelings so much. because knowing who Whedon is, a lot of this could be read very differently. There's a reading of this movie that falls within incel ideology, essentially that women are only ever attracted to a specific type of man, which they call a Chad. This, to my knowledge, is where the Giga Chad meme comes from, which, while divorced from its original context by the internet at large, still applies. Under this framework, you can easily see how Captain Hammer, with his intense masculine appeal and adoration by the world at large, could be read as the Chad archetype, with Billy falling into the role of the incel. I talked about what depth Penny does have, but it doesn't change the fact that within her role in the story, she doesn't really have a whole lot of agency. At all. So the long and short of it is that, with knowledge of the writer's actions, the series takes on a sort of Schrodinger's parody element, where it's unclear which parts are satire and which parts are genuine. It could be 100% played straight, but honestly there's just so much detail to the masculinity and the nice guy satire that I just don't believe that it's all an accident. The best explanation I can come up with is twofold. One, despite being a weirdo, Joss Whedon is still a good writer. He's capable of being somewhat self-aware and is good at writing well-rounded characters that make sense. And two, like I mentioned, he's not the only writer for this show. Sure, two of the others were his brothers. Hey, that rhymes. But the other was Marissa Tencharan, who has a cameo in the series, but is also a woman. So she probably had some more outsider's perspective on the whole writing toxic men thing. But it doesn't completely absolve the series of those issues. But that's all I really have to say about Dr. Horrible, at least with this specific, very limited context. So let's just wrap this up, shall we? After going over these two movies and this topic fairly in depth, the question on everyone's mind is this. Which of these is better at examining the toxic masculinity metaphor through a superhero lens? Well, that's a bit of a complex question to answer, so let me explain. No matter what, Megamind is a great example. It's pretty unflinchingly critical of the nice guy archetype and is generally a pretty positive example of toxic nope. Generally, it paints healthy masculinity in a positive light. It also doesn't have to be edgy to make its point. The only real bad guy is Hal, and he gets sent to jail at the end of the movie. It's already a great movie, and if Dr. Horrible didn't exist, I would be 100% comfortable in saying that Megamind was the best critique of these ideas in the superhero genre. Dr. Horrible is less cut and dry. If you were to take the reading that I gave it, it's definitely a more in-depth and fascinating look at how toxic masculinity harms people and the dark paths that can go. However, the fact that it has to have kind of more effort put into it to read that way, whereas Megamind is incredibly clear, combined with the framing of Billy's perspective and the Whedonness of it all, makes it a lot murkier. It's a slightly more ambiguous and complicated matter than Megamind, so that's why I'm not fully comfortable placing it as a better examination. So I guess the answer to the question of which one is better is, I don't know. Dr. Horrible is more in depth, but Megamind is the one that I would show to younger people in order to get the basic concept across. They're both good and bad at it in different ways. But either way, it's important that media like this exists. We live in the age of superheroes now, and while I'm a sucker for the genre, like a lot of people, there are some problems with the whole power fantasy genre, especially with the rise of increasingly extreme ideologies in relation to masculinity among young men. We need more content like this that examines the problems with toxic masculinity and how it causes harm. Otherwise, the rise of misogynistic and toxic ideology will continue. And quite frankly, it's done enough damage already. Marvel and DC execs, who I know are watching this video, hey Kevin, hey James, we need more content like this. Please. And if you can make it a musical, or have moments like this.
This town isn't big enough for two supervillains.
Oh, you're a villain, all right. Just not a super one.
Yeah? What's the difference?
Presentation!
I'll consider it a bonus. Thank you so much for watching this video. This is an idea that's been stirring around in the back of my head for almost 2 years now at this point, and it was a bit more difficult than my other videos to write. If you want to see more stuff like this, please like the video and share it around to show that support. Leave a comment if you have any thoughts, or if you're feeling generous, maybe subscribe. It really helps the channel and ensures that more stuff like this will get made. Feel free to check out my socials, including my community Discord server, all of which will be linked down below. I sincerely hope that you're having an excellent day, and I guess I'll see you in the next video. Bye!
Hello, everybody. My name is Markiplier.